the cow family contains animals like the water buffalo, the Cape buffalo, the American bison, and also the Musk Oxen themselves, all of whom are big, powerful, and can be very, very grumpy and unpredictable. Because as you can see, they almost look like walking doormats, but that's all down to the fact that their fur is well evolved to withstand the freezing temperatures of the Arctic. I mean, the outer layer is almost all very thin hair, but it's all tightly packed together. But also, underneath the first layer of fur, there's an undercoat, which is almost like cotton wool, and that acts as insulation. And to put it in perspective, if I was to put on a musk oxen pelt now, I would almost instantly start to overheat. But also, musk oxen are some of the most ancient creatures of all. I mean, they've roamed the Arctic tundra for thousands of years. In fact, it's actually said that the musk oxen evolved around things like woolly mammoths, woolly rhinos, mastodons, and even extinct predators like the dire wolf and the saber-toothed cat. And that's why they're so well heavily armed. I mean, one thing that always gets me about the musk oxen is their skull. I mean, they have enormous thick heads that are like battering rams. And of course, they mainly use those with males for battles with each other, because during the breeding season, male musk oxen will fight like battering rams over females, and they can accelerate at well over 30 miles per hour in just 5 seconds, and they slam their heads into each other, and of course their spines are built to withstand the jolts and absorb much of the shocks. But of course fights can go on for hours and can be to the death, and the winner gets to have all the females in that territory to himself, while the loser has to spend another season alone. And of course, when I mentioned earlier with the wolves about musk oxen, I mean, musk oxen are probably some of the most dangerous animals in the Arctic, and that's mainly down to the fact that if they feel threatened by predators like wolves or bears, they gather up as a herd with the calves on the inside, presenting a wall of horns to any attacker. And of course, a big, strong and healthy adult musk oxen rarely falls prey to wolves. I mean, it's quite often young calves or the elderly members of the herd that fall prey to wolves. And as I mentioned earlier, like, they are some of the most ancient creatures. I mean, they almost do look prehistoric, but believe me, they are not an animal that you would want to go up against. I mean, if their horns could snap a wolf's spine, they could probably smash a man's rib cage in a flat-out charge. I mean, you can't outrun them, and if they feel like they're being threatened or that their herd is in danger, then they will charge. Because although they are herbivores, like all members of the cow family, they will fight to defend themselves, or more importantly, their family. And as you can see, they're big, they're strong, they're powerful, and they are, as I mentioned, they are an animal you do not want to go up against. Of course, this is much of their range in the Arctic. Now, the next animal I'm going to show you is one of is another one of my favourite birds, and probably the most famous bird of the Arctic. It is the snowy owl. Now, the snowy owl is, to me, one of the most beautiful birds in the world, and also the second largest owl species after the eagle owl, of course. But of course, they live in the high Arctic, mainly on like the Arctic tundra, where they are brilliant hunters. I mean, their main food are lemmings, small furry rodents that tunnel around under the snow. But they do eat things like small birds, Arctic hares, and anything they can catch. But of course, how you tell them apart, male from female, is this here is the male. He's all white. This would be the female, and of course, probably the most famous example of a snowy owl was in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter, when Harry's owl was a snowy owl called Hedwig. Although, unfortunately, and I don't mean any offence to J.K. Rowling at all, but both she and the filmmakers got Hedwig a little bit wrong, because she was all white in many of the films, so it's only the males that are all white. And of course, also, I mean no offence to the author and the team who brought the films to life, brought the books to the big screen, but yeah, another thing that always gets me about the snowy owl is their eyes. Like, they're almost a bright yellow amber, like amber yellow, and that's actually how you tell an owl or what time of day it comes out on. I mean, if it's got yellow eyes like a snowy owl, then it's diurnal, meaning it's active in the daytime. If it's got orange eyes like an eagle owl, then it's nocturnal, meaning it's active at night. But if it's got black eyes like a barn owl, that means it's crepuscular, so it's active at dusk and dawn. Of course, snowy owls mate for life, and quite often the female will sit at the nest with about 8 to 14 owlets, and the male will be bringing back food for them, and a lot of the time that's lemmings. And like all owls, they can't digest the things like fur, feathers, skulls and bones, and so they regurgitate that up in what's called a pellet. And snowy owls aren't endangered or vulnerable. They are closely monitored, like all animals of the polar regions, but they aren't in any threat at all, which is quite good. This is the range of the snowy owl. And now I'm going to show you the largest of the weasel family, and also one of the most famous animals. It is the Wolverine. Now, the Wolverine is a mustelid, a member of the weasel family, and it is the largest of the weasel family. I mean, it's kind of bigger than a badger, but with incredibly powerful jaws and teeth, and they will happily take on animals many times their own size and have no fear whatsoever. But as you can see here, the Wolverine, because it's an animal that's well known for being fearless and brave and ferocious, it inspired the Marvel X-Men character Wolverine, who was played by Hugh Jackman. And the Wolverine, when I say that it can take on animals a lot bigger than it is, I mean, they've been known to fight with bears, which is actually very, very incredible. And like all members of the weasel family, they do have a very ferocious bite. And in fact, a Wolverine can bite with a strength of over a ton per square inch. I mean, that probably doesn't mean a tremendous amount to you, but if I was to say that a small saltwater crocodile had about the same bite force, then it'd probably make a bit more sense. But yeah, they do feed on all kinds of things. I mean, they mostly feed on rodents, rabbits, hares, birds, small mammals, but also they will take on animals as big as elk, moose, caribou, and as I've mentioned before, they can even fight bears and wolves, which is absolutely incredible. And of course, the Wolverine is not endangered or vulnerable at all. I mean, from what I've researched, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of them across the Arctic Circle. But I mean, they are very shy and very elusive creatures, so people rarely see them. But of course, as I also mentioned, they don't. This animal did inspire the X-Men character Wolverine because of its ferocity, its bravery, and its fearlessness. Of course, here is their range. And now I'm going to finish off with another animal that I mentioned alongside the Arctic wolves. It is the caribou. Caribou are also called reindeer, and they are the Arctic's most specialised species of deer. And of course, one of the reasons, well, a few of the reasons for that are their hooves are like the best snowshoes. Their fur is very thick and very dense, so it keeps them warm, and also they can travel for miles and miles. In fact, the caribou actually make the longest land migration of any animal, especially in like the Canadian Arctic, where they all travel for thousands of miles to reach their calving grounds. And because caribou are always on the move. Newborn calves have to be up and running the day they're born, but of course they aren't completely invulnerable where they live, because vast herds, which can join up to be a million caribou, they don't travel alone, and that's because of wolves and bears. Packs of wolves shadow the migration in groups of about 10 to 12 strong, and bears, like grizzly bears, of course they always wait for the caribou, because grizzly bears at that time of year are in desperate need of protein to supplement their usual diet of berries, roots and moss. And of course, at that time of year, predators are starving, and it's the caribou that they're waiting for. And quite often it's newborn calves that fall prey to them, but quite often it's not just the calves, it's also any individual of the herd that's either weak, old or sick. So there is. But as I mentioned before with the wolves, while it may seem unfair to humans, what we've got to understand is the wolves have their own young to feed, and also that the caribou migration is a big event for the wolves, and they can quite often wait months for that. And also they've got their own pups to feed, and more importantly, by taking out the weaker members of the herd, they ensure that their prey remains strong. Now, of course, when I said about caribou making the longest land migration of any animal,